So, hi everyone, and welcome back to our very first episode of 2025. Thank you so much for being here and for joining us during this journey. We're super excited about this episode because it's with two now good friends of ours, so it's so nice to be able to start the year with this episode. Thank you for joining us in person, Fatima, and online, Shane. It's great to see you both.
Thanks for having us. Very excited.
So for our listeners, to give you a bit of context, Shane and Fatima both helped us in the production of our documentary Rage Against the Machine. And no, that's not the title. It's Rage is Good, Action is Better. My bad. And that was a working title before. Exactly,
that was a working title. Very good. Glad you remember.
Name of the project.
Yeah, name of the project. And the music that motivated us throughout the process. So they both allowed us to really bring this project to life and to take our first steps as crowdfunding in this kind of world of production and stuff. So, for this first episode, I think we wanted to dive into a few different topics, like what's the process to create these kind of films, impact films, and also what it was like working with farmers, what the process was like for you guys, and all of that type of stuff. But before we go into that, maybe we can just do a quick introduction of who you guys are and how you became who you are today in the world of impact production. So, Shane, why don't you start since you're on the computer?
All right. My name is Shane McMillan. I studied journalism and something that used to be called development economics back in the day. And when I started working after university, I kind of made a very slow lane change out of making just journalism into making documentaries and commercials that were focusing on a lot of the stuff that I was looking at in my economics background, like looking at kind of how humans live in balance with the environment, how they live in balance with each other. And that's kind of how I came there. And I work in Berlin. I'm based in Berlin, Germany. And at some point along the way, I met Fatima and, the amazing team at Ecosia, and was kind of through the work with them, also thinking a lot about how do we communicate these big global issues through the small stories of people that we meet along the way. And over the last, I guess it's been now almost 8 years, we've been telling these kinds of stories together with Fatima, other members of the Ecosia team, and then in other projects that I do as well. So that's my story.
Beautiful. And you, Fatima?
So I'm Fatima, and I guess we have a similar path. I also studied journalism and film and worked as a journalist for a while and slowly went into documentary, then went into political science and started understanding how little we were doing in Europe specifically for the climate. And so that's how I ended up at Ecosia. And I've been running their YouTube channel and their social media channels and productions for a decade. It's been a decade, Shane, actually, that we've been working together.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you. So it's been a while. For me, again, I realized how little we were doing for the climate. And I had this moment when I was working as a journalist where I thought, what is the impact that I'm having? Positive impact for the world. What else? I felt like I was writing articles, and they're super important. I think journalism is super important. But I personally had a feeling that with the skills that I had, I was not doing enough for the climate and for our future. So that's how I ended up, as I said, at Ecosia. And for me, it's always been about how to paint a picture in people's minds about what the world could be like. And that's the motivation that I go out on the field with. There's a lot of climate doom. I see it too. I think you would have to be, isolated in a cupboard to not see what's happening in the world and feel it. But I want to counter that with action and with positive stories that exist of people doing amazing things. And that's my motivation and why I do what I do.
Amazing. Inspiring. One question that's just coming to mind now as well is, like, how do you find those stories? Or, like, what makes you think, oh, wait, this is a story that should be told? Is there, like, a set of rules where you're like, oh, it means this, it means this, it means this, we should do this story? Or is it more like instinctive or yeah?
Well, I mean, it depends on from what perspective I'm going to answer this question. And so I get, there's a lot of inspiring stories out there. In terms of, like, when I'm trying to tell a visual story, I'm looking into whether there is a visual anchor. There's a lot of stories that can be told better in written and that not necessarily need to be a video, because you won't transmit it as well in video as in written. And then there are stories that are genuinely visual, and that's what I'm looking for. So, for example, is there a map that I can show that visualizes, for example, how a forest corridor is being reconnected? That for me is a story in itself. It would be a story in itself if I didn't have the image, for sure. But if I wanted to tell a visual story and paint a picture in people's minds, I will find for the visual anchor. So in the example, for example, with the movie that we did with you, I was looking for a visual anchor in my head for the rage against the machine, or like this system that the food system that we have that is just not working. So that's where we came up with the idea of having the farmers smashing tomatoes and other elements that were symbolic of the system, and that's not working. I mean, tomatoes that are not paid for properly. But so that's what I'm looking for in a story. What is the visual anchor that can paint that picture in people's heads? Because I think often when you try to explain things to people and you're like going into words and it's like a mesh of words, people can't really imagine it. Once you can imagine things, you can also feel them. So that's what I'm looking for. What is the visual anchor that will paint that picture in people's heads?
And for both of you guys, like I think the stories you told on how you got into kind of the moment you're at in life, it's super interesting, and I think it's similar maybe to what happened to Emilia and myself. And my question is, like, why did you become interested in telling these stories and in acting through stories and not through any other way that you could have act with your background?
I mean, for me, kind of a little bit attached to what Fatima was just telling. I think what's amazing about this kind of work is that you travel the world and you go all the way across Europe, or you go all the way across multiple continents, and you land in someone's home or on their field or under their tree, and you start talking to them, and you realize that they have a language to encapsulate the story, a story that spans all that space in between and all the people and the lives that are unfolding in that space. I think listening to people tell stories is one of the greatest privileges that we have. It's one of the most ancient, human pastimes. And to be able to go find really great storytellers, people who are really good at communicating what's going on in their lives, what's going on in the world, and how those things have anything to do with each other, is really fun. And, our journalism training is for both of us, I think, is a part of, how we work. But I think there's always kind of this intrinsic interest just in the people who are behind it and why they do what they do and what drove them, what motivated them, what was the moment that made a click for them. Because when you can connect that person in front of the camera with the audience, I think that's just such a magical thing,
I'll add to that, like, I think exactly. And I think for me personally, also my motivation is like all I have always done and been able to do is tell stories. So it was kind of a natural progression. But I'll add to Shane, I also think that precisely because we get to tell the stories of so many people, you also start to realize there's many different ways of looking at problems or at the world and just the situation we're in. And I think that the way social media and the media in general works, we tend to focus on one type of story and one type of perspective. And showing these other perspectives, these other ways of people telling the same story, or like looking at the same problem and finding different solutions, or looking at it in a different way and imagining different possible worlds, that's for me what's so important. Because otherwise, if you're constantly surrounded by the same things, the same people, the same narrative, it's normal that you start thinking like, well, that's all we have. But going out there and seeing other people in sometimes even more dire situations say like, actually, why don't you do it this way? Or no, this is not what happened. This is what happens. That's so important to me, that we have access to that, and that the entire world has access to that and understands like, oh, actually, we could be building the world very differently. We could be thinking of this in a very different way. We can live in different ways. There is joy in doing things differently than what we've done it like so far. So that's for me, yeah.
And once you hear like personal stories of people in the front line, it's very difficult to stop doing what you do, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
And going back to kind of how this friendship started, I remember Fatima getting here from someone from Ecosia contacted Gonzalo from Crowd Farming, our CEO, and it turned out to be Fatima. Wanted to do something together. Initially, it was a video. I don't know yeah, which length,
How it
but
came to this.
yeah, but and I remember you talking to us about the common agricultural policy, and I was so confused because I was like, how do these people know so much? Like, you sent us an article that you wrote that was super detailed. I learned so much from that article, and I was like, don't these people like plant trees and do forests and are a search engine? Maybe like, can you explain what Ecosia does for those people that maybe don't know exactly what it does, and how come you know so much about what's wrong with agriculture in Europe, at least? Yeah.
Yeah. So Ecosia is a search engine, so like any other, but we invest
Like Google.
like
Yeah.
Google, exactly, or DuckDuckGo and other search engines. But we invest 100% of our profits into landscape restoration. So that's tree planting, but that's also capacity building and so on, and landscape restoration at large. So that's what Ecosia does. That's political, whether you want it or not. You enter into politics. I personally am also very deeply political. Always have been. I think Shane can confirm. I'm an EU nerd as well. Did a master's on it. I am obsessed. I am obsessed with how politics work and how it could work better for the common good. So that's how I, in a way, introduced the politics into Ecosia in a way as well. I think the entire team is actually deeply political at Ecosia. So that's why we look at all of these things that we do also from a political point of view. And because we're, I'm going to say, in the business of tree planting and landscape restoration, that means that you're right away touching into topics like land rights, farmers and the life of farmers, rural farmers, large-scale farmers, and so on. So we're in touch with farmers and the reality of them. And so with that in mind, as years went by, and we and I also very specifically started observing what impact we could have as an organization, we realized we actually need to name certain topics that are there. It's like the elephant in the room. And things like the common agricultural policy is a big one that I was very aware of, again, being a nerd of EU politics, and where I thought we really need to talk about this to our audience, which is a very committed audience who is always asking about what else can I do? Like, as an individual, what is the biggest impact I can have at a more structural level? And to me, first of all, being aware of these things like the common agricultural policy, which essentially dictates how farming is done in Europe and beyond that, actually, is an important first step as an individual to understand it, to be aware of that. And then a couple of years ago, there was a bit of hope still that we could change it significantly. So I pushed internally at Ecosia for us to really speak about this. We were supporting also groups like Fridays for Future to gain more visibility and supporting their activities in this respect, to try and mobilize a lot of people to then mobilize their politicians and the politicians that they supported to vote for a change of the common agricultural policy. So that's a little bit how it came to be, and so yeah, that's why we're very invested into these topics. A little bit my nerdiness. We're also very lucky with Shane as our main videographer for like a decade, that he himself comes from a farmer's family, so he also knows a lot about these things. So I think we inject the politics into everything we do, also because we have him.
And in the end, like, farming is just like one of the most important things happening on the planet, because it has so much to do with so many of the landscapes that we're on. And I think like it was so interesting for me in the work that I've done with Fatima and the team at Ecosia and other projects over the years, that like it kind of took all this practical knowledge that I had and practical experience as a farmer myself, as a young person, and kind of like I got to approach it through the lens of the academic work I did in university, and through the different political and other social issues that I kind of became in contact with in my professional life. So it's always so interesting for me. I'm standing in a field, in Germany, in Spain, in France, in, Indonesia or Senegal, and you're talking to a farmer and you're like, this person reminds me of someone I know, someone that I worked with, or someone or myself, and I think that's amazing. That's really, farming is a beautiful and fascinating subject, so it's really fun to work in.
Are you going to ever become a farmer again, Shane? Knowing that you come from a farm?
I mean, it depends on how you define a farmer. I live in the city, but we have a little, we have a little garden outside the city, and it is my favorite place. In my life in Berlin, it's my favorite place to be. Is out in the
Yeah.
garden, and so, and I definitely would love. I mean, I would love in my old age to be on a farm. That would be great.
I told the story of how I met Fatima, but how I met Shane. We were in Felix's farm. It's a cheese farm, well, dairy farm, and I was like, I don't speak German. I'm coming with this American to record this farmer that I don't know. And suddenly Shane actually came from a farm. He spoke perfect German. I was like, okay, I'm safe now. I can relax.
Yes, I always say Shane is the Swiss knife videographer. Like,
Yeah.
anything you need on the field, that's also the background of him having grown up on the field. Like sometimes we've had situations where, I don't know, like the camera overheats and he just comes with a banana leaf and he's like, there you go, shadow. or there's so much rain, he's like, worry not, I got tape. I'm going to do like a whole protection case for the camera out of nothing. It's like the Swiss knife. Yeah.
It's a farmer innovation.
Definitely. That's why we work so well. Like I come from a more academic family as well, and again my nerdiness and EU politics and so on, and then the actual farmer on the fields, and so that's how we've like enriched each other. And there's been situations
Dream team.
Yeah. There's been situations on the field where both skills were needed, and both were actually used.
That's so good. Such a good dynamic to have.
Oh yeah.
And also thinking more about like our project and the project we did together. What was it like, kind of the introduction to what we wanted to do, and how did you guys, like, what was the process like for you to kind of approach crowdfunding and the specific story that we wanted to tell?
Mm-hmm.
Hard.
Hard. Difficult.
Don't say the wrong thing.
Uh-oh.
I mean, I would say that we had kind of an idea of where we wanted to go. You all had a dream, or kind of, you had a feeling for what you wanted, but we didn't quite at the very beginning know exactly what it was. We knew that we kind of had, like, there was a lot of stories in there, but we didn't know which route we were going to take. And I felt like when you and I met, Christina, when you were talking about at the end of that first shoot that we had followed a workshop that was happening on Felix's farm, and we got to meet some farmers and see some of the issues. And I had this moment with him where, he didn't have a lot of time because the workshop was taking up a lot of his time. He was quite busy. We didn't really get to do a proper interview with him, but at the end of the day, the light was really beautiful. And I was like, Felix, can we just go for a walk? And so we went on this walk and we were going around, and I think Felix was a little bit nervous because of the camera, and I didn't exactly know what questions to ask, but I just kind of got him talking. And then there was this moment where I could tell that he was being too careful. He was being, like, we had talked a lot about the anger that farmers were having towards different policies in Europe and the situation that a lot of farmers were in. And I could feel he was holding something back. And I was like, Felix, what makes you mad? Like, what makes you mad about the situation? He just like unloaded about basically how he has to invest all of this money and time and effort into making his farm regenerative without any real feeling that he's going to be supported for that by the society, by the government, by the policies that they have. And it was kind of like, you talk about magic moments, the camera was rolling. It wasn't like the perfect shot because, we're walking through like mud and like over cow pies and, like, but, it was this moment where I was like, oh, aha. And that was kind of where the idea for the project was kind of born, was in this little interaction I had at the end of this first day. That was when it kind of became clear. And you two also said, you know, like we want to talk to farmers, we want to talk to people in agriculture, like that's our target group. That was when those two things came together, it became really clear to me, at least, what we were doing. But Fatima, you might have a different answer.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I think we spoke about that when you came back from that trip. We spoke about that. We realized, yeah, it's the rage. We need to put that at front. I think that for me, as I said before, I'm deeply political, and I always spearhead everything with politics. And I think that that's not always the smartest way. I think that sometimes you have to go, or sometimes politics doesn't have to be politics directly. And I think you showed me this as well when you were saying like, yeah, but like wait, let's like actually let's speak to the farmers, let them speak. You don't necessarily have to go into all the common agricultural politics and so on. So I think, as Shane said, that moment where we spoke to Felix and then speaking to you guys about that, I realized, okay, yes, I think that we need, it's about the emotion and that rage first, and then we go into the rest. I think that for me was the process, and then that's where I had the challenge of like, how do I visualize this though? Because visualizing something like the Common Agricultural Policy is relatively easy, but the rage, I was like, how do we show this? What is the anchor? Yeah.
The truth is that I think it was a process for us to, when the protests, we started writing about the protests, and I remember we wrote like 3 different like articles on this, because the thing kept changing, right? And we had to explain why we had written about the protest, because everyone was attaching this protest to a certain political party and things like that, right? And I think it was really smart from you guys to say, okay, what's the feeling behind all of this? And is it common between different farmers? And I think the rage is common between different farmers, no matter if they're organic, what political party are they from, if they are huge, if they're small, they're angry, and they're angry about something. And I think you really nail it down, the 3 things why they're angry, and in the words. It's something that we didn't, like, it wasn't actors, it was themselves talking, and you got those words out of them, why they're angry and why they have reasons to be so, right?
Yeah, exactly. And for me also, I think I realized also speaking to all of these farmers that they have a right to be angry, and it's been a while. Like, we've been seeing this protest since I was a child. Like, it's nothing new, and I think that they too, that was my feeling, at least from having like read and about this topic, and over the years having followed it very closely, I got this feeling that they were also a little bit tired of like walking on eggshells and people connecting them with a specific party and or political movement. It was like, no, like, this sucks, like, and it sucks for everyone, not just me as a farmer. And so that was quite nice to also be allowed to do. I'm very thankful that we were able to do this with you guys, because I also felt a sense of relief speaking to these farmers and sensing that from them, that they were like, that's it. We're letting this rage out, and it's about everyone. It's not just me. It's not just like me, the farmer, and all my fellow farmers. It's you. It's the animals. It's everyone. We need to change something. And that was so nice too. When you can share anger together in a productive way, that's just so liberating and empowering to me, at least.
And seeing what is being done with that anger as well, which is kind of like the whole story of our film, is how to understand that like rage and anger is the baseline for everyone, but then people approaching it, kind of like what you were saying earlier, people are approaching the problem from different angles. And in what I like about like the 3 farmers that we worked with, or the 3 places that we worked with, is that in France it was so much more about like the social side, community, and so they really approached it from that angle. And then in Spain it was more about like almost like more about justice, about prices and the whole economy and finance behind it. And then in Germany it was more about like the political bureaucratic system and all of that. And I thought that was something that I really appreciated in the final project, is being able to see the same emotion, like the same feeling of rage across the board in the different countries, and then how each project decided to work against that, or like turn it into something productive.
Yeah, definitely. I also think like obviously all three farmers kind of go through all of the problems more or less at the same time. For me, it was very important in the film to make sure that each of them could be the ambassador, let's say, of each of these problems, because I also think that different audiences within Europe, so non-farmers, citizens in France and Germany and Spain, have a different perception of what's going on and a different perception of what issues farmers deal with. So for me, it was important because this was for a general European audience that these problems were really highlighted very strongly, so that audiences from different places could understand, like, oh, it's not just this, is what I know about because this farmer is German. Spanish farmers are dealing with this, or farmers are also dealing with this. So that's also where I wanted each of them to be very strongly the voice of one of the issues.
This has been like a feedback we received. Like it's amazing to see like they all agree on kind of the challenges, and they like this is not only happening in one place or one type of farmer. There are different farmers, there are different countries, and they agree on kind of the challenges that they have. And I didn't know that this was kind of across the board. So that was a feedback we actually got. And what I also love is that we don't get stuck in the rage. It's like how beautifully they talk about and kind of the hope they have in talking about what they're doing to transform this. I think that's beautiful. Like when Felix talks about regenerative agriculture, when Paco like shows like how the fields are in the middle of summer in Malaga, like I think that is like where hope stands, like seeing them talk about the projects and not like bragging about it, but really like look at the results. I'm so happy with what I'm building in this context that it's super difficult. So I think that's like leaving on a positive note. It's something different to what we're used to see like recently.
Yeah, especially in this kind of content, right, about these issues.
Yeah, where everyone is like kind of expecting the solution to, well, many people are like, you're to blame, give me a solution. And like these people are taking the solution in their own hands and actually kind of saying, okay, I cannot wait anymore for a solution. I'm building it myself. And it's like super inspiring to see it on camera.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And the emotion behind it, like exactly the moment that you're saying with Paco, like you can just feel the kind of inspiration in his voice and that feeling of like having done something really worthwhile, and the same for Felix, being like proud of what his work means. And I think that's something so cool to have to counterbalance the initial like frustration and rage.
For sure.
So enough with the movie. I think we're all in love with it, and I think
Very
but
The whole podcast will be
very neutral
Go watch
perspectives
it.
here.
Go watch
it, please. Give it a like, share it to everyone. Thank you.
I wanted to ask, like, we've talked about why you tell the stories. I want to know about the impact that telling these stories is actually having. We had recently Waterbury in the podcast who actually like connect kind of the stories with a call to action. In Ecosia, you're like super involved in this raising awareness. You're a search engine. How do you kind of go beyond that and give people, like you were saying, kind of act on this that we're showing you?
Yeah. So that's a very good point. That's very important to us. I think there's a couple of things that guide us. I think on the one hand, what I was saying before about building an image in people's heads of how the world could be. That's a very important one that guides us. Showing tangible hope. So we want to give people hope, but we want to base it on real life stories. And based on that, we also, other than raising awareness and educating in different areas, we do want to give people something to go out with. So a CTA or like something they can do, because we really believe, and I think the farmers in your movie show it as well, action can counteract despair, right? If you act on something that triggers this despair in you, you will start feeling better. So these are the guiding principles in our content. We have different strategies depending on the platform we're on. So platforms like Instagram or TikTok that allow you to pack a message, a very specific message in short form, and then connect that to a CTA. That's something we will do very strongly, and we'll try to comment on current events, like right now the wildfires going on in Los Angeles. We'll comment on that, and where we can guide people towards where they can do something. And sometimes doing something doesn't always have to be donate or sign this petition or go out and put down some fire. For sure, all of these things are necessary. I think what's important, and that's something we're very adamant about as well, also on our YouTube channel, where we very specifically also once did an episode on climate anxiety and how to deal with that. I think sometimes doing nothing and taking care of yourself is also very important and a good action to take, because there's this one quote, I forget by whom it is, that says burned out climate activists can't really do anything for the world. Like if you're burned out, you're just not gonna save the planet. And so that's important to us, that we give people tangible hope, something to do when they can and where they can at the capacity that they can. So that will depend on the topic. It will depend on the situation people are in. But yeah, that's. Did I answer your question? Because then I forgot.
Yeah.
And also, like, stemming from that, do you guys each respectively have like a project, again, aside from our project, that has
none
really that has really kind of inspired you in that way to say like, oh, okay, we've just told this story, and because of that, these people have gotten involved with this cause, or this has happened, or this has triggered a ripple effect to help this cause, or whatever. What is your like most inspiring impact story, respectively? Hopefully you have. Oh, maybe you have the same one actually.
I have to think about it. Go ahead, Shane. Think.
I mean, for me, I think I was just thinking about your last question for like as well, and over the years, you get to tell so many stories doing this kind of work. You get to meet so many different people, and for me, the names of the people that we work on are kind of almost like their own kind of milestones. They're their own kind of like, in my life, if I were to look back, there's these people who I've met along the way, and something about the final piece that we made, or some moment in the interview, or even something that didn't even make it into the final product, somehow charts a course for the world that I've built for myself in my mind. Of what's going on? What are the issues? What are the possible solutions? And I don't know, for me, one of the probably the most important moments in my development was, there was this kind of moment when we at a Cozy kind of started realizing how to tell these stories in a way that really kind of put the person doing the work at the center. And I think for me, the first one where it really kind of like started to really click was this moment in Ethiopia where we covered this woman named Almas. She was the head of like a women's cooperative in a small village. And I just remember like we shot this story and we came back and we looked at it together as a team and we were like, wow, like this woman is just so amazing. Like you felt it when you were there. I mean, Almas is just like amazing. But then you kind of came back, and I think after that, we started really thinking more and more. I mean, we'd already done it before in previous stories, but I think after that, we really started thinking more and more in terms of these heroines and heroes. And I think, there are just so many amazing people doing so much work, and they should be recognized for that work, and they should serve as models for all of us. And I think for me, that's kind of maybe the guiding principle in all of this, there are so many stories. I can list off so many. I mean, Fatima and I had an amazing experience in Senegal last year. That was just so much fun. Working in Burkina Faso with the people there is just amazing. I can go on and on and on. So.
I think it's very hard to choose because there's so many amazing things happening. I think that the story in Senegal that he's talking about, I think there is this guy called Mr. Sek who essentially with very little water over the years started planting some trees, some Ikozi trees, and he's essentially in an area that was essentially half desertified already, created a whole forest for himself. It's a small one, a tiny forest, but that for me was one big impact story where I also saw from the engagement of the audience, the comments, we saw an impact for us as a brand and as an app basically in installs, but also just the impact of people, like the comments people wrote where they feel inspired to then do this and this, and people will share this with you, and also the amount of times that video was shared, right? So that's also a way to see that people were inspired by that. I think perhaps because when you say impact, I'm also thinking of like moments where we really saw things change. And of course, for us as a brand, how many people like then install the Ecosia is obviously one KPI we have, but what it means is like it's what allows us to understand, are we having an impact with a specific story, right? So, and for me, I think one moment that really hit me was when there were in 2000, oh God, I think, I say 17, was it? Or a bit later, 18, the Amazon fires. I mean, there's been a lot, but there was this one moment where the Amazon fires were really big. I think it was 2018. And I remember most of the team, it was the middle of the summer, most of the team being out on vacation, and this thing happened, and I'm alone in the team, and I'm like, oh my God. So I just like start writing guides about, okay, the Amazon is burning, here are things you can do, and started just pushing this across channels, back then Twitter and Instagram and so on. Did a video really quickly, and we spoke to the press, our tree planting officer and our founder Christian, and that had a gigantic impact on our brand. Like a lot of people started downloading Ecosia, but also started doing things and asking for, okay, what else, where can I donate, and so on. So I saw there, for me, that was a really great moment, because in parallel to all of this, covering what people could do and informing about what was happening as we were speaking to our tree planting partners in Brazil, which is where we were getting the information from, we were also sharing stories of people in our projects in Brazil who are trying to counter this by planting trees and restoring nature. And that just, this whole package of things had such a big positive impact in terms of people getting engaged, donating, signing up, downloading Ecosia, thinking of other apps that could help, and using those and so on. So for me, that was perhaps one of the biggest moments where I was like, we can do something. So we're not just quote unquote sharing stories on the internet and inspiring people and then they forget tomorrow. It actually has a real life impact, and that for me really fuels me. In my job work,
and I guess kind of your work, and I guess what we did in the movie too, it's part of awareness, but it's also part of kind of auditing what has been done, right? So you have this side of, we have to prove that the money and the profits are actually going somewhere. It's true that what you see on the movie, it's maybe not kind of the proper financial audit, but it lets you see with your own eyes what is happening with the money from Ecosia, what we're doing in regeneration, that it was actually big part of the movie. Like, we talk a lot about regeneration, but what do actually the farmers, what are they experimenting in the program? What is happening, right?
Yeah. I mean, this is I think what's so exciting about this work is that it's really showing people, okay, we're making these promises, we're really passionate about this, we talk about all this stuff, and look, it's actually a real thing. It's actually affecting people's lives. And I think that that's really important these days, especially for brands and companies and organizations, associations, all types of different projects that are doing good work. But people, it's so much of what we have to do these days is work that is not necessarily always visible. You have to make it visible somehow. And I think projects like this and many of the projects we've done together do that. And they also just show the emotional human story behind it as well, which I think is also really important.
And many times more impactful than maybe a report with numbers. That has to be there, because you need to have the facts behind it. But that image, it's worth
for sure. For sure. Again, exactly. It's the image. How do you anchor an idea in people's heads? It's with images, right? We think in images, and I think at least most of us, right? There are people that don't think in images. Maybe some people think in numbers. Actually, so far away from me. But yeah, I think that's a very important point indeed. I think, again, people can imagine what they see and the emotions that you can convey. At Ecosia, we're slowly transitioning to vlog format, because we've also realized that this connection, like speaking directly to a human versus someone telling you a story, right? It's very different if I point the camera at something and my voice is in the back and I'm telling you, so this is what you're seeing, versus I'm in front of the camera and I'm like, look at this, you know, like I don't know, I was digging a hole at 46 degrees in Senegal to kind of just show them like, this is the soil where like planting trees in, you know, to understand how difficult this is, because people kept asking us on Instagram. Our social media team was posting pictures of some of the saplings that had been growing there with our project on Meter in Senegal, which after 2 years are this small. Everybody's like, well, that's disappointing. And I'm like, well, let me show you the soil. I'm like digging a hole with a pickaxe, a hole on the soil, and, you know, showing them like, this is where the tree needs to grow in, needs a while. It's going to take couple of years, but even the tree growing like this is already such a huge success,
And it's alive.
Exactly.
So keep searching. You know, like so that's why these things are so important as well. And, you know, again, not just telling but showing them, and having someone, be it me or anybody else, like having a direct conversation with them about this, also we've realized helps a lot.
It's funny, it's one of our biggest projects for 2025 too. We have a new team well, not new, she's one of the oldest people in crowd farming, but she's joining our team to actually do that, like go to the farms, talk to the farmers, and do this like live conversations with farmers, because we've realized this, as you say, it's super important and makes a huge difference. Also being kind of the link between all of the people that we have on the other side of the platform and the socials and everything, like link them to the farmer. Like, hey, you can ask the questions and let's have a conversation.
Yeah, definitely. That's something, it's interesting that you say that. That's something we've been grappling with at Ecosia for a while. Like, how do we create this, like, even more direct connection with the people on the field? But we work in places like deep rural Burkina Faso, where there is no common language between our general audience and them. So we've tried in many ways. We kind of managed, I think, but there's always this language barrier. But it's fun. It's fun to try.
It's going to be not the same for us, but it's true that we work with many farmers in many countries, but we'll try to manage, see if the AI can help us with this, translations. Let's use the power of technology for good.
And I think there's so much more common ground than we think as well. So
Absolutely. Yeah, you don't need, like, this is something I've realized going all over the world with Shane. It doesn't matter where you are and what language you speak. At the end, you're talking about the same things.
Yeah.
You're just all talking about the same things. And be it with, like, sign language, you just, like, get to communicate. It's fascinating. It's very humbling.
And watching a tree grow is so universal, I think.
Yeah.
Like for you guys, seeing a forest grow is, you don't need any words to kind of show the impact that has. I mean, like, look, this tree was this big and now it's this big. Like, maybe sometimes it's not a huge difference, sometimes it is.
Yeah.
And I think that's the common ground that's so easily found for these kind of projects.
For sure. And also, like, on the, you know, the other face of the coin, like, the negative impact as well, right? It's very easy to understand that nobody wants to live at 48 degrees constantly with no water and the forest disappearing and people telling you things like, do you see that village back there? That used to not be visible because there was a forest, now there's nothing. You're like, oh, wow, you know? You kind of understand that. Like, I just, every time I come, because I'm based in Germany, and when I come here to Spain, I stay at my family's, and I'm in my old child room, and I look out of the window, and I realize, oh, so there used to be a forest, and now you just see buildings. And now I actually don't see the mountains anymore because they built yet another building a bit closer, and now I really don't see the mountains anymore. Like, you know, like, we all have these experiences, and sure, they're a little bit different, but at the end of the day, if we listen to each other, we realize we're having a common experience in this whole climate crisis situation. And that's why, to look back to the beginning, it's so important to me to tell these stories and be like, at the end, people have different ways of dealing with it and looking at it and whatever, but we're really dealing with the same thing. And at the end of the day, we all want the same things. We want to be safe, and we want ours to be safe, and we just want to enjoy life.
And so you've spoken at the beginning that you were like people are at Kosia are super political, and I think that that's a debate we've had, like how political do we make this kind of movie, and it's a debate we have internally a lot. You were speaking about kind of having that common emotion of rage, and now of having like these common experiences that join everyone together. But the pity is that I normally see that when we bring politics in, we tend to separate and lose many people along the way. How do you do this? Like when you tell stories, because political part is a big part of everything, of life, and how do you do this? Is it either in Kosia or the movies or the videos you record, Shane? How do you do this?
I mean, I think when you put things online, you will always piss off some people, and you have to live with that truth. Like there will always be someone that will be angry. Even people that I have this a lot out of Kosia, people that the followers that have been around forever and love Cozy and love what we do, and they're super supportive, and they're all in agreement with what we do. They will still be pissed off because you didn't do enough about this, or you're not pointing this out enough, and you're like, don't like what are you fighting me for? Like I'm on your side, right? So you'll always have this. I think from a very philosophical point of view, I think that we have a very wrong concept of being political and what it means to be political. I think there's politics and there's being political. I think humans, because, we come into this world, we have to live with each other and see how we're going to, live together, make it work. That is already deeply political. So there's no way you can not be political. So I've sometimes had people tell me, I'm not very political. It's like, that is not possible. You already dealing with your parents is already political, So I think we have a negative concept of what politics and political is, and that's a reality that we need to deal with, as you said, when we were doing content, because it tends to separate. I think our politicians all over the world, any side, left to right, are responsible for this. But for me, that's also a personal mission in life, to think of politics as something more philosophical. We are human beings who need to deal with each other. We need to think of how do we want to build communities? Is the community
the rules of the game?
Yeah, what are the rules of the game? Are these okay? These rules of the game always have to be. You always have to be able to discuss them. That's the principle of, I guess, democracy, but it's also just a human principle, right? So I think that I try to, with time, and also probably the older I've gotten, the more I've understood that politics doesn't always have to be head on, here's an agenda, let me throw this at you, and yes, you have your points, but look, this is actually what is right. Yeah, exactly. It's not convincing. It's about creating a space. What space do we have here, and how do we make sure that the space is good for everyone? So in the content that we create, even if sometimes it is very clearly, I guess, has a very clear political agenda, like, hey, make sure you go tell your politician to change the common agricultural policy. But sometimes it's a broader philosophical question. Like when the Amazon was burning, we were asking the question at Ecosia, who is responsible for this? Is it Brazil? Is it just Brazil? Because the Amazon goes beyond Brazil. Who does this forest belong to? Does it really belong to the president of Brazil? Right? So that you're speaking politics, but you're just opening questions. And I think that's my guiding principle. It's very hard. I think deep inside, though, everyone I speak to has this concept of politics in their heart, but it's not something that on our daily basis we are taught, or it's not how we use the word politics, nor how we use it's not how we use politics either. I think that we do use it to separate, and that's a personal battle I have with the world.
And maybe if we were more open and more open to discussion about it, we wouldn't have to be right or wrong or black or white. It would be
sure. And it's hard, right? Like I'm the first one that I'm sure in political quote unquote conversations I've probably been the person, taking a very hard position and being like, I'm right, you're wrong, for sure. But, that is also part of the of the game, of like then calming down the person in the corner being like, I'm right, you're wrong. And yeah, sometimes that's been me. But yeah.
I think it's been all of us
yes.
at some point. We've all had our moments.
We live in like such interesting times with all of this. And I think for me, the thing that I still go back to a lot comes probably from my training as a journalist, which is I think, you know, the thing that brings society together is sharing a set of questions, you know, and like what questions are we asking? Who are we asking those questions? And who are we giving space to answer those questions each in their own way and offer us. I mean, democracy and living in an open society in general is about having all the options laid out in front of you and being able as a community to decide which way are we going, you know. And we have all these communities that are happening at different levels in the world. You know, we have countries, we have little tiny villages, and you know, the stuff that we're doing is we're showing people what options there are and allowing them to choose, you know, and hoping that people come and find our offering and see, oh wow, okay, I can't quite do exactly what Felix is doing on my farm here, but you know what? I really like this idea of putting trees in between all my fields. I'm going to try it out here in, you know, Estonia or Senegal or Kenya or wherever it is that I am. And I think that that's what's really beautiful about being alive in this time, is that we can exchange ideas across so much space. It's so exciting. It's a terrifying time to be a human, but it's also one of the most exciting times to be a human in so many ways. And we get to take part in that with these stories, you know, like it's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow.
I think
Big feelings.
we're running out of time, but I have so many questions. But I think I would leave it here on kind of such a strong final positive message of speak to each other and debate and ask questions. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Can I ask a counter question?
Yeah. This has never happened.
For you guys, what was perhaps most, I think you mentioned it a little bit earlier, but what was your, maybe if you had one, eye-opening moment maybe with the movie that we did together? Was there something that you realized, be it about the topic of farming in general or about communicating these stories? Was there something where you're like, this is what I took with me?
For me, like lots of different things for sure. It was such a journey, and I was so grateful to be on it. And I think there were so many interesting things happening. But one thing I was quite surprised by, like across the whole project, was actually the openness of the farmers, like how available they made themselves to us. I did not expect that. I mean, farming is a difficult job. Like it requires a lot of time, effort, energy. We know this, and just seeing their reaction to the proposal and being like, hi, can I actually come to your farm and be with you, you know, all day for 3 days and just bother you and ask you questions and, you know, all this type of thing. And then being like, yeah, of course, for me was kind of special because it was like, oh, we're not the only ones who care about spreading the message. And they're also so open and available to this because, you know, them more than anyone knows that it's important to spread this word and to share this message. So that was kind of cool because I did expect them to be slightly more like, actually I'm busy, like leave me alone, which happens obviously sometimes, but not a lot less than I expected. That was a big one for me.
Thank you for giving me the time because I was thinking of how do I put this. I think I had a dream of what I wanted, and I think when you arrived here, Fatima, we were like, we should do some kind of video to like show what's happening. So it was perfect timing, and we had a dream, but it was very difficult to make that dream true because we are we have founders who really care a lot of people that really care a lot about about our voice, and it's difficult. We're a young company. We have a very strong voice that it's reflected on the founders really strongly, and we deeply believe on it. So doing a 30-minute piece, leaving it on someone else's hands, on farmers, on you guys, and saying, okay, let's see if the dream comes out like the way we want, when we don't even know how like the exact shape that this has, was a leap of faith, and I think it was a leap of faith from our founders too. And actually, like, having this result for me, it's amazing. Like it's magic. It's amazing. So I think that's and I think for a lot of people this movie it's going to make it clearly, even like we are 250 people, and I know many times we've tried to explain what we're doing in regenerative agriculture, or many of them have not the don't have the opportunity to visit a farm. For them, it has been an experience to have like 30 minutes seeing what the farmer has to say and what we're doing in regenerative agriculture. So I think that's like, for me, that's magic. Yeah.
I have goosebumps.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's been an honor. I know that for Shane as well. I speak for both, and I say it's an honor to do this and to be allowed to speak to farmers. Also for me personally, farmers from Spain, being from Spain. Yeah, I know it's very typical. At the end, one always says like, "Oh, my home." So that's been it's been an honor to be allowed to do this because what you guys do is super important and it's difficult what you're tackling. So getting that trust from you guys and that guidance. Is an amazing
and we've
experience.
been a pain sometimes. It's true,
but that's good. That's what makes it
because we care a lot.
Exactly.
When you care this much about something, I think it's inevitable. And also understanding for us, or at least for me, it was really interesting to understand that gap between like the vision in your mind and something like tangible and real that you can watch on a screen. Before we started the project, I was like, oh, so easy, like I'm visualizing this, let's do it. And then just seeing actually how that works and it not being easy at all to translate an idea and a vision and like a dream into something that you can, like a 30-minute long piece that you can just watch.
It's always so easy to have the idea and not implement it and know that the idea is perfect. But when you do things and you implement them and you have to do a 30-minute piece, it's with everything. If you don't try, you're not going to do mistakes. You're not going to see the reality, the tangible thing, and the ugly parts of it. So I think it's been a beautiful process, and it's amazing that it came out this great. Yeah.
And you guys were such an amazing support as well. Like, I felt like
it's turning into like a compliment session.
It really, like, there was this kind of, there, especially towards the end of the production, there's so much back and forth about tiny little details, and you guys were taking time at the end of your work days. You were working on lots of other stuff as well, besides this project, and taking the time to give us really clear feedback on what you thought. And not everybody takes that time, and not everybody is as clear-headed in their desires or in their feedback. And that was really incredibly helpful to us as a team as well. So thank you for that.
And just to end with this, I think what's really cool, what has been really cool about this process is that all of us are people who really, like, we're not, I think, storytellers, any of us. We're before that. We care about the mission that we're doing. Like at Crowd Farming, Emilia and myself, we're in the impact team. On top of that, we raise awareness and we do a lot of communication, but before that we're in the impact team. And I think it's the same with you guys. Like, you guys care so much about this topic, and on top of that, your tool to do this is storytelling. So I think like, we know the way we want to do this because we honestly care about what we're doing. And I think that common ground is mandatory to the success of this, because it's not about having a beautiful story, it's about having a meaningful story.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. Yeah. Wow, this has become quite emotional. Absolutely. I think we can just leave on that note.
Yeah.
Don't you think? Yeah, I think so. Because it has been really special, even just having this conversation and being able to debrief in this way is super special. Yeah. Thank you guys so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having us.
It's actually so fun to be able to start the year with this episode. So thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
See you in Berlin.
Bye.